Hi guys, it is me, Bishop J from Camp Gilgal TV, your host of Camp Gilgal TV. It is a marvelous time to be with you and amazing things God is doing in our lives. And He is a faithful God, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He bless us, He protect us, He shower us with a grace and a grace and grace. But let me say this before I give you the topic of today. If you come across this video for the first time and I ask you to do something kindly, I'm asking you kindly to do something. Because when people start telling you things, they don't consider you. But when they ask, they consider you. That's why kindly I'm asking you to do this. That you subscribe to the channel, Camp Gilgal TV. And after you subscribe to the channel, Camp Gilgal TV, you do what? You like the video before you go out of this video. After you finish liking the video, you share it in all your social media. And by doing so, you contributed to what? To become a missionary, to bring everybody to know the gospel. That is the right things to do. Okay, today we are going to share about what is grace. Grace. We hear about it, and it is a controversial topic. Grace. It's a small word, theological word, and it's been missing ups and downs by people. Then we would like to arrive to understand the word grace. Let me start by telling you this. The word grace, sometimes people think like grace is only in the New Testament. That is misconceptions. In the Old Testament, the word compassion is grace. In the Old Testament, the word favor is grace. In the Old Testament, the word mercy is grace. It is the way God bestows grace. There is a great verse that I love in the Old Testament when God says, He is a gracious God and He do grace to whoever He want to. That's what God says in the Old Testament. But in the Old Testament, God kind of teach us also about grace in illustration ways, in a platform of illustration. I'll take two examples today. Two examples, the life of Joseph and the life of a prophet Hosea. Prophet Hosea, and I'll tell you what is grace when God really show us what is grace. But before that, I would love to give you some of the definitions of grace. There's plenty of it out there. When you want to check what grace is, there's a plenty of it, but I'll choose what I think is good for the community of Camp Gilgal TV, for them to know it and to run with it and to keep it in their mind. What is grace? In the New Testament, the book of Luke, give us one verse that I love a lot. And by the way, let me say this. Jesus, in his teaching, he never, ever used the word grace. But you will see grace in the life of Jesus, teaching or ministry, very, very mighty. That is compassionate, is miracle, is compassion for the people, is was all about grace. And the greatest of all is John chapter 3, verse 16, when God so loved the world and He has sent His only begotten sons to die for us. That is grace at the highest level. And I'm not going to talk about the meaning of love, but I want to remain in grace. Now, there's a verse that I love in the New Testament, by the way, that the verse I always, when I pray for my grandchildren, I pray from that verse that they must grow up in that. Even when I do dedications in the churches of babies, I pray with that verse. Luke chapter 2, verse 40, to say the baby Jesus, filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. The baby Jesus, filled with grace, with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. But by the way, you can do that. You can pray about it to your children and to to your grandchildren, to whosoever you want to pray. Use Luke chapter 4, verse 20. Now, then you could say that God's favor was upon Jesus Christ. God's favor was upon Jesus Christ. And let me assure you, without God's favor, we will do nothing. And I can assure you, even unbelievers, they do have God's favor. You may not believe it, but that is the fact. Now, but it gets a bit more complex. The word grace, it comes from the Greek word called charis, named charis. Charis is where we got grace. It's called charismatic. That word come. It was a common word in a Greek word, charis, and often used as a greetings. They will say, grace to you. When they see you, they say, grace to you. Grace to you. You know, the Jewish, they go, shalom, peace be unto you. But the Greek, they'll go, grace to you. Grace to you. In classical Greek, there are three primary meanings of the word charis or grace in English. It's a charming quality that wins favor. It is a charming quality that wins favor. A charming quality that wins favor. Number two is a response of thankfulness for the favor given. A response of a thankfulness for a favor given. Number three is a quality of benevolence that give a favor to inferior. A quality of a benevolence that gives a favor to inferior. It gives favor to an inferior. In that case, it's God. God is a benevolence that is giving favor to us who are inferior. To us who are inferior. That is God. Is the highest. Okay. Another example I'll give to you. Grace is under no obligations. Grace is under no obligation. The New Testament writers use the word charis to describe the love of God to our sinners, especially a beneficent disposition towards someone, favor, grace, gracious care, help, or goodwill. That's how God grace is. It is under no obligation. Now it is important to note that charis refer to the favor of the giver. Favor of the giver, not the worthiness of the recipient. You know, if somebody gives you anything, it is the favor of the one who gave to you, not the worthiness of the recipient. Grace is favor that is not based on obligations, wage, reward, or worthiness. That is grace. Now, the Apostle Paul gives us this. There's a plenty of Apostle Paul word or verses in the Bible that is written. But I'll take this one and another one when I finish with. He says, and if by grace, listen carefully what the Apostle Paul says. If by grace, then it is no longer by works. If it were grace, I repeat it again. If by grace, then it is no longer by works. If it were, grace will no longer be grace. That is Romans chapter 11, verse 6. It says, and if by grace, then it is no longer by works. If it were, grace will no longer be grace. There is much more to be said, of course, about grace. But now we are ready for a working definition of grace, of God's grace, that might be worthy committed to the memory. Now, take this to you, community of Camp Gilgal TV. Take this. Grace, this is my definition I love. Grace is favor that is neither earned nor deserved. That is grace. Grace is a favor that is neither earned or deserved. That is grace. And that grace God has bestowed to every human being. You have grace that is upon you. Now, when you take the life of Joseph, let us be honest. Joseph was not a sinless man than all his brothers. He is also his faulty, because all of us are sins and are short of the glory of God. But Joseph, God bestowed on him a grace. When you read Genesis chapter 39, verse 21, it is saying, but the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy, which is grace, and he gave him a favor, which is grace, in the sight of the keeper of the prison. In the sight of the keeper of the prison, Joseph received mercy, compassion, and favor and grace upon him. And his life flourished. Grace is not something that you deserve it or you earn it. Grace is not something that you are worthy of it. Grace is not your wages, but it is a favor that a giver is bestowing to the recipient. And that recipient shall be you. That recipient is you. That recipient is your neighbor. That recipient is your siblings. That recipient is whosoever God deemed to do. It is on his will it be bestowed that grace upon. We don't deserve it. We don't work for it. It's not a wages. We don't do anything for it. But God make it like that. Then I will give you this last example. Prophet Hosea. Prophet Hosea, can you imagine? Can you imagine? Can you imagine? He had his wife. He married a wife. There is even debate around that. If he did marry a prostitute or if he did marry a very faithful wife who she became later a prostitute. Now, let's say he has his wife who was a prostitute and he went to marry. God said, go and marry that prostitute. Can you imagine how you go marry a woman who is a prostitute? Everybody knows she is a prostitute, a loose cannon. And your reputations of a righteous man will be put in a mud. It will be in a mud, and you went to marry that woman, and they stay, to cut the long story short, they have children, and after that, she go back to the life of a prostitute, and God say to him, go take your wife back and pay the guy that is owning her to bring her back. Can you imagine? Your character is being destroyed. People will laugh at you. You become a laughing stock in your community, in your society. But Hosea did that. That is a grace that we do not deserve to be saved. But Jehovah has saved us by sending Jesus, dying at the cross of Calvary for us. We do not deserve to be saved. But Jesus died for us to be saved. The greatest favor of all is being chosen as is from the foundations of the world. Let me stop here. It was Bishop Jeff from Camp Gilgal. I even gotten some, I'm not going to use emotion. I've been touched by God's presence. It is Bishop Jeff from Camp Gilgal. Love the video. and like the video and share the video and subscribe. Grace to you all in the name of Jesus. See you soon.